Today, The Athletic have published an interview with former West Ham left-back Manny Longelo. I say former, it wasn't that long ago that he was here. I've got to say, reading through it, it's a little bit disappointing. Just the fact that we'd let this guy go who had played in Europe for us, got man of the match, and subsequently wasn't given another chance. I view it and I read it with a sort of sense of some regret that we didn't give the kid more of a chance. Were it just to be an isolated incident, I think you could let it go, but it feeds into an awful lot more, and there's a bigger picture. And some of the comments that Manny Longelo has made during this interview are quite telling. I think he's gone out of his way to be polite, and he's clearly very pleased with where he is now at Birmingham and the coaching he's received. I'd actually suggest he's gone out of his way to be respectful to West Ham. However, there's enough in there for us to have a little look about it and be, I think, a little bit worried, bearing in mind that our under-18s at the moment are flying. They're doing really, really well. Now, we know that Mark Noble has actually tried to clear the decks by getting rid of a few players who he thinks were blocking the path for the under-18s to get into the first team or be involved with a first-team squad. That's the reasoning for letting some of these players go, most notably, quite a few of them, going to Sunderland. That's the thinking. That's the reasoning anyway. Basically, the under-18s are so highly thought of, it's thought that they are better as a group than a lot of the under-21s that were in their place. But however, I don't think that means we dismiss it and we dismiss what Longelo has got to say. Now, whenever I do any of these videos, and we'll have a look at exactly what he did say in just a moment, whenever I do any of these videos, there's always an instant comeback from a lot of people, and I get it. It's not a bad response. And that response is, but who have West Ham let go that have gone on to bite us in the arse, basically? Who have we let go that we've then gone on to regret? Who's left and basically ended up playing for Chelsea or Man United or Liverpool or wherever else? And I think it's a reasonable argument, and it's an argument that you can answer, which is, actually, we let somebody like Kieran Richardson go. The best player in the world? No, but he did go on to play for Manchester United, did play for their academy. We let John Terry go. It's not just big players like John Terry, though. There are players who probably would have been pretty useful around the West Ham squads, with players like Leon Britton, Junior Stanislas. I mean, they both had really good careers and ended up playing in the Premier League. Liam Ridgewell, for instance, there are players. You don't have to just produce a player that goes on to play for Real Madrid. Actually, somebody who's pretty useful as a Premier League squad player still saves you a significant amount of money, and I still think that's the sign of a successful academy. So with that in mind, I think there are probably examples that dispute it, but I don't want to get too caught up in that, because the reason being, historical examples don't really mean an awful lot. Just because we did something right or wrong 20 years ago doesn't make any difference to what happens now, because there's a completely different set of people running the club. There's a completely different set of people in the academy. So actually, just because we got something wrong previously doesn't mean we're going to get it right now, and vice versa. Just because we got something right previously doesn't mean we're going to get it right again. And I have been really, really worried with how West Ham seem to be hemorrhaging players from the academy. I think the big example, most recent example, is Harrison Ashby, because clearly Newcastle, clearly Eddie Howe thought he was good enough to be understudy and basically play at right back for them whenever Young was going to be unavailable. As I understand it, Harrison Ashby wanted to play for West Ham United. He just wasn't given any encouragement or any path into the first team. Harrison Ashby it was very much known to him that he was fourth choice right back, and that's just not good enough. We won't know until a few years whether that was a good or a bad decision to let him go. Only time will tell whether he goes on and has a Premier League career. I suspect it would have been a bad decision. However, Longelo played well. Elise seems to be playing really, really well at Sunderland, by the way. There have been people that have gone and watched that, and he's actually been picked out during Sunderland games by neutral observers and said, this lad's going to the top. He's going to be a Premier League player. And it just really feeds into the opportunity that these players don't get at West Ham. And I just want to read you a couple of things that Manny Longelo said. He was talking about being named in the squad, if you remember, last season in the Europa League for the Dinamo Zagreb game. and he got named in the squad, and it's the whole article goes on about him being very, very excited about it. He said he was named man of the match in that particular game, as you might remember. I did think he was outstanding. I also thought Elise was outstanding in that game, and as Harrison Ashby was as well. But here's what Longelo said about it, and there's quite a worrying part in this. He says, I remember they scored a great goal, and I thought this could go either way. I'd hate for it to go in a bad way. He said, but I became more confident during the game. At half-time, the manager, David Moyes, praised me and Harrison Ashby. He said, these young boys are full of energy. Keep giving them the ball. That gave me a huge amount of confidence because he doesn't usually give compliments. Talking about David Moyes. My family and friends came to the game. Everyone kept telling me how well I played. They thought that I didn't play. He said he didn't think he played that well. But when he spoke to his friends and his family and other people that watched the game, and he got man of the match, he was surprised. So, I mean, this is really good. Clearly, this is a humble kid. The first thing that worried me in that was the fact that at half-time, manager David Moyes praised me and Harrison Ashby. He said, the younger boys are full of energy. Keep giving them the ball. So he didn't actually say to them, oh, by the way, you're playing well, but I understand it. It was still a compliment. He took it as a compliment. What I hated was the fact that he said that gave me a lot of confidence because he doesn't normally give compliments. Imagine, he's actually saying it there. The manager giving me compliments gave me confidence. I don't think that sounds great. It's great that he got a compliment at that point, but you know what? It's got to be a bit of carrot and stick. This is what I think anyway. So he goes on to say that the build-up to the game was crazy. He said, I was supposed to play against Crystal Palace for the under-21s, but Mark Robson pulled me in his office and said, I won't be travelling. He said, what do you mean? He said, why am I not travelling? He said, it's because I'll be training with the first team. Then apparently, Mark Noble and Declan Rice said to him, you're in the team. He said Mark Noble and Declan Rice were building him up. They got him all excited. Why are Mark Noble and Declan Rice telling him he's in the team? I don't fully understand this. Anyway, I think that the point of the article is that Longelo thought he played really, really well. He said this, I thought I'd done enough to be around the squad, but unfortunately it didn't happen. This is post-game. This is after he's got man of the match. It hurt a lot because I started asking myself, what more do I need to do? Then I got injured, which was quite annoying because I was supposed to go out on loan. If you remember this, we were in a situation before he got injured where Cresswell was injured, Masuaku was injured as well. Now, I remember this well because at the same time, Vladimir Soufal was injured. The reason that's important is it meant Ben Johnson couldn't cover at left-back. That was the perfect opportunity to play this young player, to play Longelo. And we were not in any kind of trouble last season. And I just look at it, I think, if you can't excel, what's the point? If you can't go into that European game, get man of the match, and it doesn't mean you get some place in the squad, then that's pretty crappy. It's even worse if it means that you can't get a place in the first team. Particularly if everybody else in your position, so basically the first two players who play in your position, Cresswell and Masuaku, are out, plus the cover player, Ben Johnson, can't play there either, because he's got to play at right back to cover Soufal. You know, I think, if I remember rightly, I think off the top of my head, I think Fredericks might have played left back or something like that. I mean, it's a kick in the teeth. And now he goes on to say, Longelo, that he's really happy. I could paraphrase, well, I will paraphrase the whole rest of it. He's really happy at Birmingham. He feels like he's got an opportunity. He feels part of things. He's involved in training. He absolutely loves it at Birmingham City. And I find this quite worrying and quite depressing for a number of reasons. Because we keep hemorrhaging these players. We only got to look at Sonny Perkins. There's another good one. Sonny Perkins played 3 times for Leeds now. For their first team since he left us. He was getting no opportunity. I think he even scored a goal, actually, in one of their cup games. There are a number of players. Ekwa's left. He looked like a really good player. When he left, he made a parting shot. He said, I'm just not getting any opportunity. The trouble is, what you've got the academy is not working hand in hand with the first team. Ekwa, I think that's the right one. I think Ekwa signed from Chelsea, quite possibly. And he signed because he didn't feel there was a path to the first team at Chelsea. So when he signed for West Ham said, come to us, there's a path for the first team. He comes to West Ham, actually there wasn't. And that's why he had the parting dig at the end. This is worrying. And the reason this is worrying is just going back to that under-18 team. Have got a lot of very, very good players. You know, the under-18s who were basically Marshall scoring goals for fun. If it were just one player who had these problems, just Longelo, I don't think it would be an issue at all. But there are loads of them. I don't think there's a conspiracy where they all agree to say the same thing when they leave. I think they're just all telling their own personal stories, which is basically there is no encouragement at West Ham. I don't mean in the academy. I think the academy do a great job. But at that point where you go and make the transition over to the first team, there's no encouragement. The manager's not even speaking to them by the sounds of it. And we know this anyway because Alex Kral's told us that. Vlasic has told us that. And this is a real worry. And I know we'll go back to what I said at the start, give you an example of players that have gone on to have a career. It doesn't matter. I did give you examples, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Because what it means is we could have, even if none of that was true, or it all was true before, we could have the most promising crop of young players coming through the academy at the moment who are flying. Well, I think it's fair to say one of the best under-18s teams in the whole country. Some players there who are being earmarked by other clubs, because other clubs want to poach these players, by the way, as having bright future in the game. Yet when it comes down to it, when you start factoring in what Longelo says, what Perkins says, what Ekwa says, what Elise says, when it comes down to it, when they get to the point where they're going to sign pro forms, and they're there with their agent and they're there with their parents and they're going to make a decision on it and they've got to decide what club to sign for, they're going to decide on a couple of things. Who's going to provide me the best contract? But most importantly, if they're being well advised, and I would assume that they would be, which team is going to give me the best pathway into first team football? I've got to say, I don't think you'd choose West Ham.